murder wise. Grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Before we get started, if you want to see more awesome comic book videos like this one, it only takes 2 clicks to become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers. Click, click. What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Powers of 10, number 5 by Jonathan Hickman and R.B. Silver. And in this issue, we're going to kind of touch on some things that we picked up in House of X, number 5. We're going to talk a little bit more about the process that Charles Xavier uses with Cerebro in order to copy mutant minds, and in light of talking about Cerebro, we're gonna kind of briefly address why what Charles Xavier is doing might already be problematic. We're also going to talk about the Krakoan government system, such as it is, and we're also going to talk about one of the most dominant mutants in the history of the Marvel Universe, turning Krakoa down. And we're going to talk about all of that right now. Also, before we go any further, I know a lot of times I get asked questions about where I get these awesome t-shirts from. I have no answer. I buy t-shirts at random and usually through Facebook ads. Also, this shirt's almost 2 years old, so I've slept since then. Now, one of the things I thought was really interesting about this comic, the way it starts off, Jonathan Hickman always hits us with a quote first from a character that is probably featured in that particular issue. And in this one, it opens with, "They will think we are doing one thing, but the truth is, we are doing something altogether different." And I think this is kind of a double meaning. I think this is also in regards to humanity in these comics, but also think it's for the audience, the reader, you, the gentle reader, gentle watcher, whatever you want to call it. But basically, a lot of what has been going on here, and I've seen this a lot, especially in our Discord, which, by the way, link totally in the description. But I feel like a lot of people they think that things are going to go one way and actually go somewhere entirely different, because that's the nature of Jonathan Hickman. But that's neither here nor there. I think there's no harm in wild speculation, as long as people realize that their wild speculation will likely not become the finished product. As long as you can accept that, so can I. When we kick this book off, we learn a little bit more about the creation of the current version of Cerebro. We learn that, of course, we know that the original Cerebro was technically Charles Xavier's design, and that the further iterations of it were by Beast. We learn that the current iteration is of Forge's design, and we learn that when Charles Xavier wanted to upgrade Cerebro to the level that it is now, being able to not just locate mutant minds, but also copy them, copy their essence down to their thoughts, their beliefs, their fears, their loves, likes and dislikes, mannerisms, all that stuff. Beast didn't think it was possible. But Forge, being a guy whose literal mutant powers be able to build the things that he can think of, Forge actually thinks that this is way outside of Beast's area of expertise. He actually knows that it can be done. The problem is it viable? Is it actually something that can be done with current technology? Because at that particular point in time, that type of technology didn't exist. But we all know that Forge loves a challenge. We learn that Forge actually has no compunctions about the idea of copying mutant minds down to their very essence and core. He actually thinks it's more than possible. But Forge also recognizes that there's 2 very particular things that you are going to have to address. One of which is volume, and the other being redundancy. Because the thing I think we're not really thinking about is what all is going into Cerebro right now. I've already addressed a lot of the intricacies of Cerebro in the previous video, so just go watch that if you want to hear that information. But what we're going to be talking about here is the new information that we have gotten, because what's going on here is that, yes, there are going to be 5 backup copies. We knew there were backup copies, we just didn't know really exactly how many, and now we know why. Basically, what Charles is telling us is that there's going to be 1 main copy of all these mutant minds, 3 additional backup copies, and 1 that he keeps for what he calls unforeseen complications. The thing I find very interesting here is that we don't really get a clear-cut answer on this final part, but Forge does ask the question if he wants to integrate this new version of Cerebro, all these copies and things of that nature, into the old framework or build an entirely new existing one. And Charles Xavier says, hey, I'm gonna leave that up to you because clearly you're the only person qualified to make that call. And of course, the only thing Charles cares about is will Forge build it for him, and we now know that he built it for him. But I do also want to point out, because we did learn a lot about, how these copies work, but we don't really know exactly what all it entails, and this kind of explains even further, even more so than with the last issue, as to why Charles is always wearing Cerebro. Of course, yes, we know that he is using it at all times to copy the minds across the entire Earth, but once a week, he is copying the latest. He is copying the latest version of each mutant. Even the ones that he's already copied, he's creating new, latest, updated versions of them. And this process takes about roughly 3 hours for every mutant mind on the Earth. But once a year, Xavier makes a hard backup of every mutant on the planet. And this just isn't some update. This is literally a completely new copy. This is not an update. This is literally 100% starting over from scratch with whatever it is they are at that point. And this is a process that takes Charles 3 days. And they make a point to say he cannot be interrupted or disturbed while this is going on. And I do appreciate the fact that they actually go back to something that we talked about in the previous video about how you don't have to put the exact same mind into the exact same body, meaning that you could take the mind, the essence of, let's just say, Wolverine, and put him in the body of Cyclops. You could do that. You could totally do that. However, I think what a lot of people started really talking about and speculating on has now kind of been shut down, because they do make a point to say that when you do that, more often than not, it's going to result in something fatal happening. Basically what they're saying is unless that mutant had some type of ability to mitigate that damage that it would do to one's mind and body, the results of a mismatch like that would be fatal. It would kill them. So, I mean, you could probably do the reverse of that. You could probably put Cyclops in Wolverine's body, but I don't know, seems like a waste. But what they do make a point to tell you is that the person operating it, the telepathic operator, which in this case, we're talking about Charles here, you can replace your own mind with that of a previous legacy version. But it's a difficult process that would most likely require one of the most powerful telepaths on the face of the planet, and they make a note to say that Charles Xavier has done this twice. Now, what that means, does that mean that, is the original Charles Xavier mind still in there? Has he reverted in some way? I know some people have brought up the whole Onslaught thing, are they going to bring back Onslaught? Is Onslaught going to show up? I mean, you never know. Could maybe potentially be a backdoor way to bring Onslaught back in. I don't know. It just seems like such a waste. I'm not going to lie. Not a fan of Onslaught. I think I've talked about this on the Blerd Cave, but yeah, not a fan of Onslaught. So if they're going to bring Onslaught back, unless Hickman is writing it, and I know he's going to take very special care of this character and maybe, in some ways, maybe do a better job than previous writers, I don't want it. Unless he is on board for it, I do not want it. They also make a point to let us know where each of the cradles are for each of the mutant backups. We know that, yes, of course, there's the House of X, there's Island M, there's the Summer House, which is probably exactly what it sounds like. It's probably maybe Scott's place. We don't know. The Point and Mora's No Place, which is, once again, when you think about No Place, that is one of the areas of Krakoa that Krakoa doesn't even know about. We also learn about how Emma Frost was brought into the fold. Now, I talked about in the Blerd Cave, someone asked me what the bigger, grander picture is that Charles Xavier was planning for Emma Frost. And I'm going to tell you right now, I wasn't that far off the mark when I talked about in the Blerd Cave. Now, yes, I said that you look at what Emma Frost was asking. She was saying that, hey, buy me something nice or make me a governor of a province. And Charles said he had much bigger and bolder plans for her. Well, we now know that is exactly the case, at least especially in the early goings of this when they were setting up Krakoa. Emma Frost initially didn't want any part of it because she felt that Charles and Magneto were being reckless, putting all mutants in one place yet again for humanity to come along and snuff them all out is just a foolhardy idea at the best of times. Emma just cannot wrap her head around the idea of trying to do something that has already been done before, especially in a world that does not want them to exist, let alone thrive. Which, I mean, honestly is, when you think about it, yeah, it's kind of a dumb idea. But Magneto assures her that this isn't gonna be like before because the numbers are already growing. By this particular point in time, where Krakoa is still just in its infancy, they are already planning to, within 1 month, having 100,000 mutants on Krakoa, and then in 3 months, having 5 times that. And then within the next year, being at 2 million strong, which even by Magneto's standards says that this still means they would be woefully behind the scale of what it is they should be, where they should be at right now, considering that at one point in time, there were 17 million mutants up until the Genoshan Massacre. And when Emma sees Krakoa for herself, laying eyes on it for herself, she is on board. And she even says, she says one more time, for the children, not for herself, but for the children, because that is one of the things I think people forget. That yes, some people will often say that, oh, Emma Frost, she's selfish. Oh, yeah, she only has her own self-interest at heart. But at the end of the day, everything always kind of goes back to one thing, and it's her first major loss with the Hellions, and she has often tried to make up for that ever since. And I think people forget about that because, I don't know, I feel like it's just easier to, have this weird, Mandela effect that, she's always been a villain and that she will always be a villain, and, we just kind of roll with it. But I think a lot of times people forget the character growth that she has had since, being a villain in the Hellfire Club. But basically what they're doing here, and once again, I've talked about this before, the Hellfire Trading Company, they're basically handing over distribution of all things, the mutant drugs, all that stuff, to Emma Frost. And they are cutting her a very nice deal here. Basically, she is going to get the contract for 50 years. Magneto kind of lowballs her first with a 20-year deal, but Magneto quickly realizes he's insulted her and offers her a 50-year deal instead. Now, where things get really interesting is that when Charles offers her a seat on the council, because we learn that the government structure of Krakoa by this point is basically a seat of 12. It's a council of 12 that make all the decisions on Krakoa. And more importantly, Emma is being offered 2 seats. A seat for herself and a seat for a person that she's probably not going to be crazy about bringing on. And this explains why we have Sebastian Shaw back in the mix, because they want Emma to be the face of Krakoa. They want her to be the face behind the mutant trades, the Krakoan drugs, everything that they're going to be using to try and build a face for humanity. They want Emma Frost to be that face on the legitimate side of things. But they need a shady side as well, and for that, they want Sebastian Shaw. They want Sebastian Shaw to smuggle and work the Krakoan drugs into the places where humanity doesn't want them to be, but also smuggle the mutants of those areas out. Now, once again, I go back to this, you're talking about how, a lot of people just automatically assumed that all the stuff that came before, all the, the Uncanny X-Men stuff, all the, X-Men Black, and this, that, and the third, people just assumed that all that stuff was just retconned and thrown off the table. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that that is not the case. Because the first thing that comes to Emma's mind is that I just got rid of it. She ousted Sebastian Shaw and became its new Black King. That is absolutely still the case. She has done that. She may not call herself the Black King anymore. However, she is still in charge. And with that, Emma Frost decides that, okay, fine, we can bring Sebastian Shaw in, despite the fact she doesn't want to work with him again. However, for her trouble, she is going to need a 3rd seat. And we don't necessarily know exactly who that is, but when we go to look at the list of the Quiet Council of Krakoa, is what they call it, we learn a couple of things. First thing we learn is that there's actually 14 seats. The 12 that were already in existence, an extra one that was added likely because of Emma Frost wanting a 3rd seat, and maybe those other seats already being filled, and we also learn that Krakoa is one of these seats as well. So there's actually 14 seats in all reality, and they're broken down into seasons. We have the autumn, the winter, the spring, and the summer. And then of course we just have Krakoa, which Krakoa itself is Cypher and Krakoa. Those are the 13th and 14th seats. Professor X and Magneto are the 1st and 2nd chair under the autumn banner, and we learn that Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost represent the spring, the 7th and 8th seats. But one thing I thought was very interesting is the fact that all the other seats are blacked out, and I don't know if maybe this is just my version, because I have the digital version, or maybe this was in the actual copy as well, but one of the blacked out names is Mystique. And it's not that hard of a stretch, because you gotta remember that back when Emma Frost took over the Hellfire Club, Mystique was her White King. So clearly, she trusts Mystique in all things. So it makes sense that Mystique would maybe have that slot. Or maybe this was the thing that Mystique wanted from Magneto and Charles when she went and got the data from Damage Control. That could also be a thing. So maybe we still don't know who that other seat is for, who that third seat is for, but regardless, if the answer to either was Mystique, it would not be surprising. Now, as far as the other seats on that council, I can make a very strong case for maybe characters like Exodus, Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, Storm, maybe Marvel Girl, even Cyclops being members of that council. I could easily, very easily see each and every one of those characters also being on the council. Now, once again, I don't know if maybe it is my copy, like the digital copy, because I didn't get the printed version, I got the digital version, so I don't know if it's a digital printer's error or if this is something that actually shows up on the print version. You can tell me in the comments. I might see that if it's within the first hour or two of this video's release, but I have the sneaking suspicion that was not an accident. And also I talked about, one of the most dominant mutants on the face of the planet turning down Krakoa. Let's talk about that, because we do go back to seeing the Acolytes getting the invitation to join Krakoa, which clearly they joined. At the very least, Exodus did. We also see Mr. Sinister accepting his invitation. We see characters like Omega Red being offered an invitation. And of course, we see Gorgon getting offered an invitation. But the one character, I think a lot of people, because Jonathan Hickman actually said something on Twitter, shout out to JWR in the Discord who brought this up, was talking about, who it could possibly be. He was saying that, Powers of 10, number 5, is going to be where we're finally going to see the mutant everyone's been waiting for. And I think a lot of people had all kinds of crazy answers to who it was going to be. A lot of people assumed it was just going to be Mora, but once again, like I keep telling y'all, when Hickman puts stuff like this out there, what he's talking about is someone we haven't seen yet in this series, and he was right. This is a character we haven't seen yet, and honestly a character that I didn't realize I wanted to see until just now, and it's actually the character I just kind of automatically assumed it might be, and that character is none other than Marvel's first mutant, publication-wise at least, and that is Namor. Though sometimes I say Namor, or Namor. It's kind of like saying Thanos and Thanos. I'm not here to argue about that. Anyway, Charles has given him this offer, and it's kind of interesting how he handles it. Because you gotta remember, he's been up to a lot of stuff lately. He has been pulling all kinds of wild in the Marvel Universe for a good while. And even before that, we still can't forget the fact he did drown Wakanda. We can't forget that. He's also drowned New York twice. Just throwing that out there. The point of the matter is, Namor sees this for exactly what it is. He recognizes Charles isn't buying everything he's selling. The fact that Charles is trying to pretend that he recognizes that he's better than humanity, that he is their betters, and that they should stand apart from them and embrace the superiority that they hold over humanity. He's glad that Charles has finally figured that out, but he doesn't think Charles really believes it. And more importantly, Namor also points out that he's not like Charles in that. He's always known that he's been better than humanity, and everyone else for that matter. He doesn't believe that Charles actually believes this, and he tells Charles to kick rocks until he actually means what he says. Even in his quote at the end of the book, it says, "When you see me again, understand what that means." And what he's talking about is his place over humanity, knowing that he is, like Namor, better than everyone else. I think a lot of times people forget that Namor is a mutant. It's just one of those things I feel like gets lost in translation. People are more concerned with comparing him to Aquaman than actually recognizing that he's a mutant. I always find it funny that people also spend more time trying to slam Namor for being a copy of Aquaman, which really is kind of a lie. He's not. He came out in 1939. Aquaman didn't show up until 1941. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Namor doesn't want any part of Krakoa. He already has his own kingdom, and he's perfectly fine. Granted, his kingdom gets constantly on, by humanity because of pollution, but that said, he does have his own nation. And the reason why I think people are gonna probably not fully understand this is because
Namor already has a kingdom. He has Atlantis. He has everything. Everything that Krakoa is trying to become, Namor's already had since day one, and he's fought to defend it for years. So if anyone understands what Charles is trying to do, it would be him, but if anyone would actually be able to tell whether or not someone actually stands by their convictions and what they're doing to create and defend a nation, and especially a one in its infancy, he would also understand that too. But I think this is something very important to think about, that yes, this is probably going to, once again, I keep saying this, these are threads that are going to pay dividends down the road. I guarantee you, this is not the last time that Xavier and Namor are going to see each other. Now, when we get to the final part of this, and once again, I'm not going to spend hardly any time on this because I'm not going to lie to you. This particular part of the story went from being the most interesting thing to me to being the least interesting part of the whole House of X, Powers of 10, whatever. I think this is actually the weakest portion of this entire story, and this is regarding Year 1000 with the Phalanx, and which it hurts me to say that because the Phalanx, they're one of my favorite X-Men villains. I just always thought they were cool. The only thing I will say is that I do find it very interesting that when they break down the types of societies, they make a point to throw out there that this Dominion, which very likely is what they're dealing with right now, categorically gods in that they're indistinguishable from any and all mythic or religious comparison. The only primal threats that a Dominion of Phalanx fear are Galactus and the Phoenix. So there's that. I honestly thought that all this other stuff, I thought all the stuff in the very beginning of Powers of 10 was way more interesting than the Phalanx stuff, so I apologize if you were wanting any insight on the Phalanx part of it. I apologize. It just ain't my thing, and I would rather talk intelligently about things that I actually understand and know about, and also, and more importantly, enjoy, than talk ignorantly about things I don't like or don't care for. Which is why many of you may have noticed I don't cover comics on this channel that I don't like. I would be doing you a disservice. So if you ever see me make a video about anything, and yes, that includes Captain Marvel, it's because I genuinely enjoy those things. But anyways, at this particular point, we only have 2 more issues to go. We've got House of X number 6 that comes out next week, and then we also have Powers of 10 number 6 that comes out the following week. And the funny part about that is that Powers of 10 number 6 is the final issue, but also the final highlighted issue. So that means we're gonna see some wild shit coming up. But anyways, let me know what you thought about Powers of 10 number 5 by Jonathan Hickman and RB Silva. Sound off in the comments. So hey, you made it to the end of the video. Awesome for you. If you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, I don't see how you didn't, do me a favor. Hulk smash that like button. And if you want to see more awesome videos like this one, make sure you click subscribe so you can become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers, and tap that bell so you know when I post up. Also, feel free to go check out my Patreon, where if you chuck in $1, you can get early access to most of my videos up to a week early. And if you have time, make sure you swing by nerd901.com, where you can find more of my content as well as other amazing stuff. Anyways, until next time, I love you 3000 plus Ultra!